good? All right, my time has 9:30. The chair will call this meeting to order. We will, first item of business is the approval of the minutes. Has every member had an opportunity to review the minutes? Is there any discussion or proposed amendment to the minutes? See none. I make a motion that we accept the minutes as printed.
Second.
Motion has been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All against? See none. The ayes have it. Moving on to, clerk will read.
Consent agenda items 1 through 9.
Are there any questions for staff on consent agenda items 1 through 9? Is there any discussion at the bench for consent items 1 through 9? See none. The chair moves to accept consent calendar items 1 through 9.
Second.
The motion has been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Madam Clerk.
Report of award bid and contracts dated January 27th, 2020. And Wichita Airport Authority report of award bid and contracts dated January 27th, 2020.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, City Council, Hannah Lang, Department of Finance. Today to present the January 27th Board of Bids. First engineering bid we have is water distribution system tied with sanitary sewer improvements to serve Castlegate 3rd Edition. Recommendation is Mies Construction for Group 1 of $42,800, Group 2 $115,771, for a bid total of $158,571. Paving for Clear Creek to serve Clear Creek Addition Phase 5, Pearson Construction for $193,282.75. Stormwater Drain number 461 to serve Estancia 2nd Edition Phase 3, Mies Construction Group 1 $158,096. Group 2, $221,779.15, for a bid total of $379,875.15. Liquid blended phosphate, recommendation is to defer to February 3rd Board of Bids. Portable radios for fire department with Motorola for $54,785.05. Modifications of Evergy infrastructure with Evergy for $113,138. The open request for proposals, we have an RFP out for parking and security services with transit. If you would like to become a registered vendor or propose, there's the city's procurement website. With that, we recommend to approve the bid award as recommended.
Questions for staff? See none. Discussion from the bench. See none. It's in order to make a motion. I move the recommended action of receive and file, approve the contracts, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All against? The ayes have it. Motion passes. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Higginson comments.
I'd just like to remind everyone that tomorrow is Kansas's 159th birthday. Tomorrow is actually every year at January 29th, we celebrate Kansas Day. So please do something special tomorrow to celebrate our great state.
My understanding is that I have a appointment to the Park and Recreation Board. Is this correct?
Correct.
Is it in order to make that appointment at this time?
Mm-hmm.
I would like to appoint Dale Goder to the Park and Recreation Board. And I have a second appointment I was going to make in the interest of transparency. However, I received 2 lists that had discrepancies in them, and thus I will hold the appointment for the plastic bag committee until next meeting.
I move to approve the appointment to Park and Rec.
Second. Any discussion? See none, all in favor? All opposed?
Is this for both? We
For the-
approve
I'm sorry, Mayor, can we get clarification on?
Yes,
your
my
statement
apologies.
After the motion?
The statement after the motion was just for, what was for the point of discussion, for clarification to those in the crowd, as I mentioned before, that I attended to appoint further board members to a different committee. However, I made that comment during the appointment of Dale Goder to the Park and Recreation Board. That motion is for Dale Goder to be on the Park and Recreation Board. I've asked for a second, it has been seconded, and now we are voting. So if it pleases the clerk, and without any objection, we will begin voting again now that we have clarification. All in favor of the appointment, say aye.
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 All against? The appointment passes. Thank you.
So the appointment to the Plastic Bag Task Force, that one we're not going to do now?
No, as I've said, I have received nominations for that committee, except on 2 separate times I received the nominations, there were discrepancy in the list, and thus I need further verification of the members who have been presented so that I can make an accurate appointment to those who want to be on that committee. So I would ask the patience of those interested in that committee as we ensure that we do this properly at the next meeting.
Thank you, Mayor.
Madam Clerk? So we will recess into executive session, or do we adjourn first and then recess? Move to adjourn the meeting, is that correct, staff?
No, we'll need, Mayor, you were right the first time. You need to recess now because you do have executive session. We thought because of the crowd, and I think people are here to hear some of the issues on the workshop, if you would just go into recess now, and then we'll do the workshop, then you'll start the meeting up again, and then we'll go into executive session.
Excellent, so the chair recess, and then next.
Need a
Session.
motion on that?
We're- We are recessed.
No motion, thank you.
So recess, we let people leave.
Mayor, we have two items for today's workshop. The first one has to do with a process that we've been working through this year to make it more convenient for our residents that want to obtain information and participate in our leisure services programs so that we could do more of a one-stop type of approach, one-stop shop approach, excuse me. I'm going to turn over to Reggie Davidson with the Park and Recreation Department to give a presentation on the RecTrack, WebTrack system that we'd like to implement in February.
Thank you, the chair, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. As the manager mentioned, I'm going to give an overview of the RecTrack, WebTrack, as well as the Evolve magazine that we're actually implementing that goes live in February. So the groups that are involved with this joint venture for the city is City Arts, Library, Parks and Rec, Cowtown, and the Police Department. As the mayor mentioned, we were looking for an opportunity to do a one-stop shopping to be able to give the citizens access to programs and services that are offered through these various departments, but being able to go into one location to access that information. So kind of give an overview of the actual system, the Evolve magazine, which is a joint guide that where those activities will be listed, as well as where they can actually go to register for those programs as well. So there's 3 different components that we're actually covering today. RecTrack is where the city staff actually goes in and input the transactions on the back end of the services that we actually provide to the community. WebTrack is the web-facing portion of that where they can actually log on to the website to register for programs, book our gazebos and open shelters, as well as look at our community facility locations as well. And Evolve is our comprehensive brochure that includes activities for City Arts, Parks and Rec, and the library. So all of those activities will be in one guide that will go out to the community for them to actually access, and it will replace our individual guides that were being offered for each of those 3 departments. And it will be distributed 4 times through the year to the community to actually access.
Reggie, how many?
We have
Can you recognize
30,000 copies that are printed each quarter for those to be distributed in the community.
How many, I'm sorry?
30,000.
Thank you.
So kind of the benefits of the customers for accessing through the system, it has one location for all city programs. They have one username and password, so that once they log into the system, they can access all the services for each of those 3 departments and not have to worry about remembering username and passwords to access each individual department itself. And then they have the opportunity to actually go in to explore programs that are offered through all 3 departments. So it gives an opportunity for those community members who may have particularly been involved in the city arts program or a library program or Parks and Rec to see the whole spectrum of the programs that we offer throughout the city. So as we mentioned earlier, it will be distributed 4 times throughout the year during the spring, summer, fall, and the winter timeframe. And this gives you the schedule that we will be actually using internally of when those programs and classes are due for us to actually input into the system, which would then be downloaded to our Evolve magazine. So a little bit different from what we've done before in the past with the Parks and Rec guide that we had individually. Each of our staff members out in the field would have to put together a Excel spreadsheet sent to one person. They would copy and paste it into the system for us to actually edit and update to be able to print out with our printer. This system allows us to actually allow them to input the information at the local level at the centers, and then that information is actually downloaded and just formatted. So it streamlines the process for us to be able to go in and get the information there, empowers the staff out in the field to be able to input the information themselves there at the local location. It makes us a little bit more efficient and effective in what we do. So I mentioned earlier, RecTrack is our internal portion where our staff actually goes in and input information in the system. So there's 2 portions to that database. We have a live version as well as a demo version. So the demo version gives our staff an opportunity to go in and actually test the system, input information, make changes that doesn't affect the live environment. And the same thing with our WebTrack portion as well, which is the external portion. We're able to actually go in and make changes and input information there and then not affect the live environment. And it uploads on Tuesdays and Thursdays for anything that we put into the live environment that are final changes that we want that goes into the test database so the staff can actually do transactions there to work within the system itself. So our website that we actually have for the community to access the programs itself is wichita.gov/evolve, and that's where they will actually go to access the information, see what programs that we have there. Gives a lot more flexibility than what we had previously. That location also gives us an opportunity online to be able to rent our gazebos and shelters there live, showing what's available to be able to actually make those reservations there. With our community facilities, they can actually go in and make a request for a permit to have a staff person come back to resolve or schedule something for them that are available. But it gives them a calendar of what they can actually access for the city to actually use. That's different from what we did before. It was all a call in to catch someone in the office to make a request to what's available on this date and so forth. Now they have that ability to be able to do it themselves online. And I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a view of the actual system itself, so you can see what it actually looks like from the web page itself. Just going to cooperate with me here. So this is what the city, the community will actually see when they log on to Evolve itself. This is a home page for it, so that gives an opportunity. You'll see on the front here, it has scrolling that shows pictures from each of the departments that are represented on the actual site itself. They will log in on the right here with the username and password. Then they have the capability to go in and search for programs under the different categories that we have here. So we came up with header categories that encompass all of the programs that we offer throughout the city. They can search in each of those areas and then have subtopics that they can narrow it down even further for specific programs that they're looking for. Gives them an option to actually search by location, by age group that they're looking for. So if you go here and hit the search button, and you go to activity search, it gives you a breakdown of what those options are that you can actually look for. So if you're looking for something specifically for a particular age group, you can look for it there. If you're looking for it in a particular type or subtype or location, it narrows it down for you for that to be able to view it as well. So it makes it a little bit more convenient for the community to be able to access all of those programs at this one site. I'll do a brief search here just to give you an idea of how it looks when it's displayed. So I search on that particular category, and it shows here all of those programs that are available that falls into that particular category. It gives the pricing that goes along with it, the location, as well as the time frame for it, and the days of the week where it actually meets. So, and it gives at the top, you'll notice here, it gives a little brief overview of how they can actually access the information. So someone coming in new into the program can actually see here what they can actually do, how they can search through it, and to find the additional information that they actually need. So this is a basic overview of the system, how it works. We're rolling out the live system on the 10th of February. That'll be available for the community to go in and start accessing it. We're going to be doing a marketing campaign in conjunction with the communications department to get more information about the rollout of it, how to get those existing users access to their passwords ahead of time. So when February 10th comes, they can actually go in and start registering for those programs that we have available. So I'll open it up if you guys have any questions.
Well, Mayor, one other thing I wanted to mention is we're using this opportunity also to eliminate duplication where it may exist across departments and try to identify the specialty areas for our departments. So one example was we had art programs offered by Parks and Rec and also by, you know, some of our art facilities and cultural arts. So we're trying to say, okay, that's a better home from cultural arts unless it's, you know, there's kind of a special permission granted for Parks and Rec to play in an area that we would normally wouldn't from the museum standpoint or cultural standpoint. We'll continue to look at programming so that we can best utilize our resources and I think provide the best expertise for the classes that are being offered.
In addition to convenience, is there cost savings?
I'm sorry?
In addition to the convenience of streamlining,
Yeah.
is there cost savings as well, or is it more based on convenience?
I don't know that there's a cost savings that we've identified. It's probably much, right now, it's an ease of use for our customers. In the past, if we didn't have enough people sign up for a class, we just wouldn't offer the class, so we wouldn't have cost associated with the instructor. We wouldn't.
Councilmember Clayco.
I have a couple of questions. Thanks, Reggie. This looks like a good system. If someone finds something here that they're interested in, then how easy does it become for them to register? Because I see they have to log in and,
You actually log in with the username and password that we mentioned on the top here. So it's just like online shopping. So if you see something here that you're interested in, you hit the plus button that's here on the side, comes up, you add it to your cart, and then you're able to go to your cart once you're logged in, and you can check out from there to actually register. So it gives them an opportunity once they log in, whether it's a city arts, a library, or Parks and Rec program, goes into the same shopping cart with one transaction, and they're able to make the purchase at that time.
okay, so it's very simple. My second question is, you mentioned something about updates on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I take it that's to the programming.
That's correct. So what I was referring to, if we have new programs or things that we're actually pushing out or updates to the database that we're putting in, the system updates on Tuesdays and Thursday nights. So what's in the live environment goes into the test environment for our staff to actually look.
Okay, but if a customer books a facility, that takes place immediately?
That's correct. It's
Not-
actually instantly. We have two tiers of actually what we do. The gazebos and the open shelter doesn't require any additional paperwork or anything that's required to reserve the facilities. So they can actually go in, make the request, and reserve it at that time, because it's for the entire day. With the other facilities that we have, it's a permit request. It goes to the person that's responsible for that facility, and they review it and then follow up with the customer to complete the transaction.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember
Reggie,
Tuttle.
Reggie, I have two questions. First of all, thank you. Great job to all staff who's been involved in this. First, how are you going to promote it so that people know that this is available? And then what if somebody's really low tech like me and they don't want to shop online, they want to go old school? What's the option for someone to be able to still do that?
Sure, we still have the option for that, so someone who wants to just come into a rec center and someone at the front desk can assist them with doing the transaction there, they can still do that. That gives an opportunity to do it online for someone who wants to do it that way, or you can even phone in and make a transaction over the phone as well.
Good.
So we have 3 different points that we can actually do a transaction with.
And then how are you going to promote it so the community knows about this awesome resource?
Sure. We actually sent out in our last guide that we had for the fall for Parks and Rec, we put a ad in to kind of announce it. We're working with the communications team. We're doing some how-to videos, some awareness that we're actually doing. Going to be reaching out to the mayor as well for his mayor briefing that we do to get it out there. We're reaching out to the local news channels to actually do some coverage on the morning shows with them to raise exposure about it, as well as we're doing some other social media outlets as well.
Just a thought, may want to work with schools too, maybe with Wichita Public Schools and see if they could promote it somehow.
Sure.
Other discussion or questions?
Yeah, I've got one.
Council-
Not a question, but
Person?
thank you for this. This is awesome. I've heard from a lot of parents about going to get guides from Dillon's and trying to navigate, and this makes it much easier. So I definitely appreciate it and great work.
Thank you.
Further discussion? See none, thank you.
Thank you, Reggie.
Thank you, Reggie.
Thanks, Reggie.
We're really excited about this. I encourage you to get on, maneuver through it. It is really easy to use. It made me feel like, actually, I was hoping I could link it with my Amazon account, but. The second item is a pretty significant item to bring forward. It has to do with the next step of our water and sewer system improvements, large capital projects. And this is the one related to sanitary sewer and the biological nutrient removal process that we've been talking about for a number of years. We're going to talk a little bit about the need for this program, why we're doing this, and then the capital implications and the process that we intend to follow going forward in order to seek possibly federal and state assistance as we go forward. Anyway, with that, I'll turn over to Alan King.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Alan King, Director of Public Works and Utilities. As the manager said, this is the next step in us working on our utilities, both our water and our sewer utilities. Back about 6-7 years ago, we made a greater emphasis on the amount of water mains and sewer mains that we replaced, recognizing that the city is like all other cities and utilities across the country where we have some deferred maintenance and replacement. And to responsibly address that, we accelerated the amount of water mains and sewer mains that we replaced each year. That was kind of an obvious, almost low-hanging fruit first step in renewing and replacing our infrastructure. The more difficult ones are what we call vertical assets, the water plants, the sewer plants, the pump stations, those sorts of facilities. And as you probably know, we took some significant steps just recently in getting a project underway to replace the city's water treatment plant. And we'll be breaking ground here real soon on that project. That was a significant project. Well, on the sewer side, we have a similar kind of need as far as major investment in vertical assets, and that's our sewer treatment plants. And we have 5 of them. But one of the things that makes this, the timing of this is not so much that our treatment plants are failing or that they're in some way not meeting our needs, it's regulatory. So it's a different kind of a driver that's pushing us into this, and that is we have a permit from the state and the state requires us to meet certain standards on the water that we treat and introduce back into the rivers. And that permit has created a change that our current treatment plant can't meet. It has to do with biological nutrient removal, BNR. And what we mean by nutrients is the chemicals of nitrogen and phosphorus. It's the chemicals that create algae blooms, fertilizer, will fertilize your yard. Well, that's not good if you're putting too much of that nutrient into a river. It creates problem for the ecosystem. And so we are going to be restricted in the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus that we can put into the river. Right, the discharge limit that they're talking about is that we're going to have to meet is 10 milligrams per liter for nitrogen. We're presently releasing over 34 milligrams per liter. So you see, we've got a ways to go from where we are to where we need to get to. In a similar fashion, if you have a maximum amount that we can release of 1 milligram per liter phosphorus, presently we're at over 4 milligrams per liter. So again, there's some progress that we have to make in reducing that nutrient. In addition to that, there's anticipated that in the future we're going to have new and even more restrictive standards called enhanced BNR, and those are going all the way down to 6 milligrams per liter anticipated, and 0.5 milligram per liter. So even though we can do something with this new project to get down to the limits that are coming up, we also want to keep our eyes wide open for opportunities for this investment to be there and available to support an even further future requirement for this enhanced BNR. So you can do BNR, biological nutrient removal, chemically, mechanically, but you also have to consider what effect that has not only on your existing infrastructure, but also on the byproducts that come from sewer treatment plant. You have solids, biosolids they call them, and you have to get rid of those too. One way to do that is to spread it out on agricultural land. It actually helps the farmer, but we need to be careful that whatever process that we choose doesn't in some way cause us other problems with the rest of our processes, like biosolids removal. So what we're looking at is meeting this standard that the permit's going to require. Our current permit, it's issued by the state, KDHE, on behalf of the federal government, EPA, and it's about a 5-year cycle it is a 5-year cycle on the permit. Our present permit will expire in 2022, so we're expecting that somewhere near, usually it would be at the end of 2027, the next 5-year permit, that we have to meet these standards. When you consider about a 5-year construction window to do this work, it's about time to start thinking about this now. So what we're bringing forward for your consideration, for you to look at, is getting out to 2027, working from the right to the left, backwards in time. We need to have our next treatment plant construction completed and meet those permits somewhere around 2027. We have a really good working relationship with KDHE. They're really like partners more than just people, giving us standards that we have to meet. They do that, but they work with us. And so what we've told them is, what if we can't, something goes wrong? I mean, this is a really tight timeline. And they said, we would be willing to extend that even into some part of 2028, so long as we can see it's part of an ongoing process that gets you there. And so we're aiming for the end of 2027, the end of our permit, but we've got really good partners in KDHE to help us so that we won't be penalized if it goes another 6 months into the next permit cycle. So if we figure about 5 years for construction, it's similar to the kind of construction schedule we're looking at for our water treatment plant. It's a significant project. That backs back to the design that has to take place towards the end of 2022. So we have to design this project to be able to put it out to bid or design bid, and that's going to take some period of time. Ahead of that, earlier than that, we need to have a design concept and prepare the necessary paperwork for a letter of interest for the WIFIA funding. It's, a project of this size, it's going to be really important, the kind of funding that we approach this with. As you know, with the water treatment plant, we went after WIFIA and state revolving loan funds, and that has a significant positive effect on our ratepayers. And so we're going to try to go the same route with this investment in the BNR, and we intend to apply for WIFIA and the state revolving loan fund. But to do that, we need to have at least a 5% design completed and a letter of interest prepared to submit to EPA for WIFIA funding. That's the project that we're talking about now, proceeding with now. We would like to, depending on the kind of feedback we get from y'all, we'd like to issue a request for proposals for this preliminary, what we call concept design, up to 3 to 5% design that is necessary for us to proceed with this project, not only to go to the actual design, but also to have the necessary information that we need to submit an application for WIFIA funding. So the way this would proceed is we talk about conceptual design. We've been looking ahead at this project coming up. We've known for some time that we're going to have to meet these BNR requirements, and we've had a sense of what it was going to entail. What we did was in our last master plan update, we were required to have a master plan for both the water side and the sewer side. In the last master plan update, we asked the consultant to provide us with some different scenarios, not knowing specifically what the funding was going to be like and some other information that was unknown. We wanted to have at least some choices to consider, and so that we have 5 scenarios involving 3 of our treatment plants. Plant 1, which is the one that's really more of a kind of a big pump station that pumps down to pump 2, or plant 2. Plant 2 is our major sewer treatment plant. And then plant 5 is another treatment plant that's out by the airport that's really functioning more like a scalping plant. But there may be some opportunities for us to use it too. We don't know what the right combination is between plant 1, plant 2, and plant 5. So what we would like in this conceptual effort that we're talking about now is to have the consultant evaluate the various scenarios. But it's not just scenarios of which plants, which sites you use, but also what treatment processes you use. And so what we want them to do is to also consider at least a couple of treatment processes, because there's more than one way to achieve the BNR requirements. So in a combination of looking at these various sites and some different treatment processes, what we'd like to do is to get it down to what we think would be the best option for the city, and have them do that through a business case evaluation, a BCE. That's the process that we used in the water treatment plant. What you'll probably see for those who are involved in the water treatment plant work is a lot of parallels between what we're doing here and what we have done in the water treatment plant. We learned some valuable lessons, and I think have come up with a really good approach, and we want to make sure that we carry that forward into this project as well. So we'll do some business case evaluations, we'll have some criteria for how we evaluate them, and come up with what we think is the best approach to use both in sites and processes. And we want to look at it from the standpoint of two approaches. One is what process gives us the best results with the kind of budget that we've set, and we're talking about $355 million. That's our very preliminary budget amount. That's what's programmed into the CIP right now. That's what's covered already in the rates that you folks have been looking at. So this is not something new, but we want to know, is that $355 million amount, is that the right amount? We also want to know is not only what approach would it take to stay at that or under that budget amount, but is that the smartest way to go? If we look at total life cycle costs, not just the construction costs, but the costs of this project running it into the future, because it's going to be in service for quite a few number of years, are there some things that we could do that reduce our total life cycle costs? So it's really a smarter approach to take that approach than just simply meet the $355 million amount. In addition to that, we want to keep our eyes open towards this future requirement. If we have some opportunities to put some things in place, do things in a certain way that in the future lead to being able to meet the more stringent, enhanced BNR requirements, it may be a smart thing for us to consider to make that investment now, and so that we can have a smaller investment and not have to undo things in this current approach. So we're keeping our eyes open for that. But that's what we're looking for from our consultant when we put out this request for proposal, is to give us some concepts and help us see what is the right approach for us. Like I said before, we have talked to you folks when we were talking about the water treatment plant. We showed you projected rate increases. I want to stress this is rate increases per year. So if it says 5%, that means 5% more than what the previous year. If it was flat and no increase, then it would be 0 on this graph. So this graph shows additional rate increases, so that people don't sometimes get confused with that flat line, thinking that there'll be no rate increases. It's rate increases per year. That red line, which is nearly 6%, that's the expected national rate increase across the country for water and sewer rates. So as you can see, our rate projections fall below that 6%, and at the same time are giving us the capital funding that we need to do the things like water and sewer main replacement and the other sorts of capital projects that we've identified. It covers the water treatment plant, and it included in here is the funding that would be necessary for this B&R project with some assumptions. And those assumptions are that we are successful in getting WIFIA. We'll find out soon if we are successful. We submit our letter of interest, and then EPA will get back to us and invite us to apply. But just to let you know that it built into these rate projections is an assumption of being successful in getting the WIFIA funding. So what you see here is what you saw on the water treatment plant, no surprises. The rated projections do include funding for the B&R. So again, when we talked about the business case evaluation, this is the approach that we used early on in the water treatment plant. Served us well, got us to where I think where we needed to be. We'd like to use this same approach with the sewer treatment plant, the B&R, where we identify the different facility scenarios, the different treatment processes, and then we evaluate those different scenarios with some criteria. And then what we'll be doing is we'll be returning back to you as a city council about November of 2020 with the results of that work, so that you have some idea about what was identified, what if the amount of the project has been revised, and if there's more than one way to do it, kind of the long-term look with the lower total life cycle costs and protecting future investments for the enhanced B&R, or just an amount that we need to do that keeps us at the budget amount that we have in our CIP. We'll be bringing that back to you once we have that information. So one of the things that we're doing is we're trying to accelerate this project so that we can get our letter of interest into EPA early enough that it can be considered in an already authorized WIFIA funding opportunity. WIFIA could go in multiple years. I mean, but what we know is right now, this next WIFIA round, it is funded, and so we want to make sure that we get our letter of interest in a WIFIA funding opportunity that exists. So we're looking to do this development of this letter of interest, and you need to have that 3 to 5% concept design. And that same work is also needed to apply for state funding through the state revolving loan fund. Both of these have a significant impact on reducing the rate increases on our ratepayers, and so we want to make sure that we make full use of these, take the opportunity to apply for this funding. We'll be returning back about March of 2021 once we have the final letter of interest and get permission from you to go ahead and submit it. It's the same sort of an approach that we used last with the water treatment plant. We developed a letter of interest, brought it to you, you authorized us to present it, and we were successful. We got the letter of interest, succeeded in an invitation to apply, and that's put us on the track that we're on right now. So what the schedule looks like is we'd like to, as soon as possible, issue the conceptual design request for proposal and go through a selection process, a competitive selection process for the consultant that would do that work. And we would like to bring back to you for contract approval after that selection process in about April of this year, a consultant to do that work. Then you'd have the treatment plant, or the treatment process piloting. So in other words, here's something that's important. We're not only looking for them to look at various processes and sites as far as evaluation, but we're actually intend to do some pilot testing, have them set up some equipment at our treatment plants and actually run different processes with our influent, the sewer coming into our treatment plants, and look at what the impact of those processes could be on the final design. This is a way for us to get some early value added into the process by actually doing some pilot testing and getting a better understanding about what sort of impact various processes would have, not only on what we build, but how we operate. So we would have those treatment process piloting going on, and the scenario development and the BCE development, with the idea that we would have the letter of interest proceeding to EPA for funding. So that concludes my presentation, and I stand for any questions you have. Yes, sir. Mr. Boulay.
Can you kind of go through the similarities and differences of how we did the water treatment program, and as far as the design build and everything we did? Lessons learned, what kind of things we're going to do differently and what things we're going to do similar to that process?
Very good question, sir. We're trying to incorporate those things that seem to really work, and it was obvious that the value added was an important part of the approach that we took with the progressive design build. We don't know well, we certainly want to incorporate that in every step that we can of value-added engineering, but we don't know if exactly the process that we use in the water treatment plant is the best way. We want to stay open and look at some alternatives. So, for example, rather than using design build, would we have a value added through our owner's rep with a design relationship between the designer and that owner's rep, and then have a more competitive bidding process if we have the bidding with contractors, not just design build teams. Don't know if that's the right approach or not, but we want to be open to see what are the different possible ways that we could deliver this project, with the eye being that we want to have as much value added that we can to the process, and for it to be as competitive as possible, because we're finding the more competitive the approach you take, probably the lower prices you're going to get. Haven't really made any conclusions at this point as far as whether we're going to do it exactly like the water treatment plant. We're just keeping our minds open at this point.
Yeah, Councilmember, that's a great question. Alan, can you go to the next slide? Maybe we want to talk through this a little bit. This is our best thought today. So that Alan said, the beauty of the design build was the continued value engineering, right? But we think there's a way to do that without pinning down a design build team on the front end. And then also relying on the services of an owner's representative early on in the process. So Alan, you want to step through what our current thoughts are, recognizing that, again, as we get closer, after we get through the business case and the business evaluation, we may come back with a little different thought, but.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Manager. The step that we're talking to you about now is the concept letter of interest development. That was done by a separate designer in the water treatment plant project. It was the first step that got us to the successful WIFIA funding opportunity. It was not purposely not the design build team. It was just a consultant that did that work. Happened to be Burns and Mack that was the consultant during that time, but not as the design build, a member of the design bid team. We think that makes sense because they're really focused on just preliminary design. What we wanted to do, though, is to increase, even here at this early step, the amount of value added that we got. And so what we talked about doing is this piloting of various processes so that we can learn what is the best process for us. What are opportunities that we can take to save money, both in process design, but also in ongoing operating costs. So we're going to purposely add in this early step some value-added engineering through the piloting process that wasn't present in the water treatment plant approach. Following that, then we're going to go after the WIFIA funding, And it's not as though we have an opportunity to decide to go forward with the project or not go forward with the project. It's a required project. It's mandatory. We have to meet those BNR requirements. So the question of whether we get BNR or not will really affect our rates, not so much on whether we go ahead and proceed with the project. So we're planning on going ahead and proceeding with the project. And one way to do it is to have an engineer do full design all the way up to issuing of bid packages, and have through that process where we would normally get a lot of value added. We certainly got a lot of value added in the water treatment plant process at this stage, is to have our own, rely more on our owner's rep to help through the design, working together with the designer, similar to the way that the contractors worked with the designer to identify additional value-added opportunities. And so that's where we get value added during the design process. When we get all the way down to a more complete design, not a 30%, which is where we were at last time when we kind of turned the key into the design build. When you get all the way down, now you have some certainty of what you're actually talking about building. That helps not only us from a cost control standpoint, understanding what will be built because it's more fully designed, but it's very helpful to the contractors, because the more definition you have in your final design, the more the less risk that the contractor is going to have to build into their bid. Also, we don't necessarily want to stick with a single contractor. We may decide to go out with bid packages, which opens up the competition with different contractors even more. The idea being that we want to try to get as much competition amongst the contractors as possible. In our water treatment plant process, that seemed to be where we got the most bang for our buck, was getting the contractors to be competitive, to come up with competitive prices. Now, we're going to look at this and see if this is the right way to do it. We may go back and look again at a more progressive design build, but what we're trying to do is say, if we wanted to do it, can it fit into our schedule? Can it fit into our approach, with the idea of being very transparent and objective as far as the award of contracts, award of the work to the various contractors and consultant.
Further discussion or questions?
I have a couple of questions, Mayor.
Of course, Madam Vice Mayor.
Thanks, Alan. This is great. You mentioned that there is the possibility, like we did on the water treatment facility where we didn't get WIFIA the first time around. Would we have the possibility of waiting a year like we did on water, or however long it was? I know it was at least a year on water treatment, and said, okay, we're going to try for WIFIA again. Do we have that flexibility?
We do. It's not the best. It's not Plan A. But we don't just throw in the towel and give up if we don't get it on the first round. We didn't get it on the first round on the water treatment plant. What we would do is we would attend the briefing, find out what things made our letter of interest strong, what things were weak and needed to be buttressed. But one of the things too is that we have some cash funding opportunities available to us. We also have a pretty good sense that we will be able to cover some of the costs of this project with the state revolving loan fund. So the state revolving loan fund, together with some cash on hand for cash flow purposes, could probably get us through to that next WIFIA application. But if we're not successful there, then probably we're going to have to face the hard choices of what we do in terms of revenue through rate increases.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Wouldn't we need an extension of WIFIA at the federal level to be able for us to go a second time? Because I thought this had us applying in the last known funding round for WIFIA.
That's correct. It would require that the WIFIA was actually even available. Thanks, that's a good
Right.
point.
Yeah.
That's why we're cramming this in right now.
That's why we're working on this schedule.
Right.
Because we don't know for sure that there'll be a WIFIA extension.
That was going to be my question, but then also, is there precedent across the nation for a community receiving 2 rounds of WIFIA funding?
Well, we had
So
some,
close together?
Yeah, we had some concerns about that. The 2 concerns that we had in an earlier conversation with the evaluation staff was, they're trying to spread the money around. And we already received a very significant WIFIA funding through the water treatment plant. So does spreading it around mean that they're going to look at somebody else besides us? That was a question. The other is that, when you have a project, if the WIFIA funding makes the difference on whether you build it or not, or how soon you build it or not, That was a really high-ranking criteria in the WIFIA process, so we had a question about that too. But since that time, we've been talking to EPA staff about, what has happened. And what we've found in that some of the projects that have been awarded since that conversation have been repeat receivers and have been for projects that were required through regulatory reasons. So the concerns that we have may not be cause us to predict that we won't be successful, but we're always taking the conservative approach and not assuming that we're going to get the funding.
Thank you, Ellen.
I have some more
Madam
questions.
Vice Mayor.
Thanks. And based on this, I just want to verify this. This, because it says engineer number 1 and engineer number 2, this does not lock us into engineer number 1 at all, right?
That's the idea. And we took the same approach on the water treatment plant, is we had an engineer do the preliminary work for us, and it was not a guarantee that they would proceed as the engineer for the next phase of the project. They ended up being one of the team members of going to the next phase. But we want to do is protect that distinction between the phases so that we try to encourage as much competition as possible.
Okay. And then a follow-up to that is this idea of whether we use design build or whether we design it and then go out for construction RFPs. When in the process would that decision be made?
Probably in the 30% design, that first half of the design that's about the point that you need to make that decision.
Okay.
And at the 30% design, what we'll do is we'd look at what exactly is being constructed here. How dependent is this particular design that we're looking at on input from contractors, or can our owner's rep provide that same sort of input? So we'll be using the information that we don't presently have as part of this early 30% design to help us make that decision.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion?
Aye.
Representative Clendenin. Excuse me, by that I mean Councilmember Clendenin. Almost as what
I tried
Representative
that
wants
once, it
though.
didn't work out.
I remember that. The floor is yours, Councilman.
Boy, now I'm distracted. All right, Alan.
Kane's here,
So
sorry.
thank you, Vice Mayor, for your questions. Those are some of the questions I had about the letter of interest on our ability to get approved for a second application. Just want to make sure we are continuing to build those relationships with the EPA regional office. And Bob, as I said, I think in our last meeting, I think it really behooves us at least to stop in when we're in DC in March to keep those even at the federal level in DC, those relationships going. It's fun when the EPA actually smiles when you come in. So the other thing is, Alan, the biggest issue for residents down around the area is odor control. In this, is that also something, when you're talking about BNR removal, that will be mitigated as well? I know some of our newer plants have virtually no odor associated with them. Are some of those upgrades also going to be incorporated?
Those are definitely design considerations that we want to make for this project. We've been holding off on doing some of the obvious odor control measures that we have, for example, in the newer treatment plants. You're right, council member, with the idea that eventually we're going to be doing a substantial makeover of this treatment plant.
Yeah.
That's probably the time to do it. And so the answer to your question is yes, we are looking for opportunities to reduce the odor emanating from the treatment plant.
If you look at slide 4, there it talks about the 5 scenarios that will be tested, but we'll also be looking at 3 other items, and odor control is one of those, because we are aware that that's been a significant issue for a while.
And then something that nobody ever wants to talk about is water reuse. And my hope is that as we're looking at this, that we are looking at ways that our treatment plant can move into effluent reuse opportunities. There are cities that are doing it all over the country. It's extending their water supplies well beyond. And I think while we're doing this, this is a great opportunity to make sure that we're looking at reuse options. I don't think it's out of the realm, and if we don't want it in our potable system, we can figure out a way to do it otherwise. But I'm constantly having engineers tell me that the water that comes out of our treatment plant right now is cleaner than the water in Cheney Lake. So it would be nice to see if we could start exploring those options as well.
Well, and that's been a standing policy of the council. If you remember, I mean, our initial analysis was our cheapest gallon of water is one that comes from reuse. And that's why we have the 1 million gallons a day that we sell to Spirit, and that we were able to make that arrangement work for them. And we'll continue to look for those opportunities as we do the redesign.
Well, I think that there's a thought, and maybe I'm wrong, but there's a thought that we have to sell reused water, or even if we bring it to potable standards, that we have to sell it less expensive. Because I know that when we do some of that gray water wholesaling, we lose revenue. I mean, we don't sell it for as much. And so I don't think that's the case. I think the water is as good or better quality. And so when we bring it to potable standards, so just from what as I'm talking to certain experts, so I think that as much as this is a difficult discussion to have, I think with the community.
Yeah, we've learned some lessons from the Spirit sale, and it still requires treatment before it can be used in their industrial process, and so they do incur additional costs using the water, and so that's why we try to recognize that in our sale costs, but
that's
we'll continue
gray water,
to work on
correct?
that. That's
would be
gray, that is gray water.
Yeah, okay. I want to distinguish a little bit between gray water and actual potable reuse.
You're right.
That's kind of the distinction making. Thanks.
And one of the less obvious benefits of using effluent reuse water is it helps us with our conservation targets. The least expensive water is the water we don't even have to produce. And so we have a growth curve in terms of demand, and we're looking at a way to blunt or flatten out that growth demand, because that means the steeper that line, the demand growth, the more water resources you have to identify and bring online. If you can flatten out that line, it means that you don't have to bring those expensive additional water resources online. And so what we've been doing, including with the Spirit Project, is looking at the benefit of not using potable water, but using some other source of water, and that is a conservation method that we need about a 0.35% per year reduction in demand on the growth curve to be able to meet our current water resource planning. And so there's a real value as far as reuse, just as you said, council member, for using that reuse that helps us with our water portfolio.
Councilmember Johnson's on the list next.
thank you.
And then I'll add.
Thanks, Mayor.
Madam Vice.
Ditto what Councilmember Clendenin said about when we go to DC. The other thing is I just really want to encourage like a lot of discussion about design and design build prior to RFPs going out, because I didn't agree with changing the process last time, and I would hate to see that happen this time. So the more discussion we can have about that and some agreement beforehand, I think would be best in this case going forward.
Vice Mayor Clayco.
Thank you. I have a couple other questions now. So the rate increases that we show are with WIFIA and with the State Revolving Loan Fund? Correct.
Those assumptions, yes, ma'am.
Those assumptions. So when will we look at if we don't get WIFIA? I know you've shown us some of those projections over time, but that won't look like that. if
No,
we
we
don't.
we can bring that forward at another time. We
Yeah.
have it. We have a very busy chart that has about, I
Yeah.
don't remember how many lines in it, with a whole lot of different assumptions.
Yeah.
And as we start to get a better feel for where we're going to be, we can
Okay.
provide that information.
Okay, yeah. I hate to be the depressed one here, but I'm just. Yeah. And then my other question is, can we get the State Revolving Loan Fund without WIFIA?
Yes, ma'am.
And is it just the half, not just, but is it half of the 355 million?
We're not restricted to that. That's how it ended up with the water
Okay.
treatment plant, not because of a restriction on the state funding, but because of the WIFIA funding. The
Well, we
WIFIA
could give
funding
them
could
that.
only go to half, and so we brought in the other half through the state revolving fund. So we don't necessarily have that restriction. There are cash flow issues that they have to take into consideration on how much money they actually can offer to us. We haven't entered into those negotiations or discussions yet, but we will as we get closer to knowing what the actual price is.
All right, thank you.
Further questions or discussion? See none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thanks, Ellen.
Mayor, that's all we have for workshop.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. In that case, we will continue in recess. However, I move that the city council move into executive session for 20 minutes to receive information on a matter involving Wichita Airport Authority property pursuant to KSA 75-4319B2 for legal consultation with the city attorney, which would be deemed privilege in the attorney-client relationship, potential litigation, and legal advice. This session is required to protect attorney-client privilege and the public interest. The executive session shall begin at 10:30 and end at 10:50 and be held in the city council conference room. The city council has returned from executive session. When the city council returns from executive session, I'll move that the executive session be closed. Needs a second.
Second.
There's a
Mr.
second
Mayor,
to the
may I
motion.
suggest we remain in this room for the executive session?
We can remain in here.
This is
Oh,
the,
Jennifer's saying we can remain in here. Since
There are no
they-
objection?
They all cleared the room.
any discussions? Seeing none, there's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We are now in executive session. This is the
Cameras
council
are
room,
off.
isn't it?
Cameras